All right, aloha everybody. Let's talk arrows and arrow noise. I made a post about this on the Instagram as it relates to our local Hawaii axis deer hunting. And if you bow hunt axis deer enough, maybe even for the first time you bow hunt them, it's highly likely you will probably experience them ducking or dodging your arrows, or what is more commonly referred to as jumping the string in bow hunting. Those kinds of things. Generally, the noise of the bow firing or the arrow coming at them, and the axis deer being naturally extremely fast and quick reflexes, dodging out of the way of your arrow, or even worse, perhaps creating wounded shots that you don't recover a deer. And I think for the local guys that bow hunt on the public access hunt, Lanai, on the island of Lanai, is pretty much the only public access hunt that I'm aware of that we have archery that is popular enough that a lot of people hunt. And you guys can check out my YouTube video. I've got quite a few of those on Lanai. And yeah, I experienced a lot of wounded deer out there. I'm gonna admit, some of those are me. When I hunted with a stick bow, I had my share of wounding. And even when I hunted with a compound, I had a lot of deer duck my arrows, dodge my arrows, and it's just super frustrating. Like I think I can relate to the guys out there that are still experiencing this very heavily today. And probably nothing sucks more than spending all that time taking the vacation, doing this. You do everything right, you do the stalk right, you get on maybe your first deer, the one you want, or maybe it's a nice big buck, and you're getting this one opportunity, and you shoot and you do everything right, and you still don't hit them, or worse yet, you wound them. And it could have been likely because they moved. Now, of course, you could also be a crappy shot and crapping your pants under pressure and shooting like shit when you're out there. But and for those people, if you're shooting crooked and all, whatever I'm saying here about arrows or anything about gear, you can just forget all about that. I would suggest that you get your skill set of shooting down priority first before you start worrying about anything gear. That might hurt some feelings, but hey, it is what it is. Like, you can buy the best stuff, listen to anything across the whole internet, this or that, but if you don't have the skill set to shoot straight when it matters, then kind of all this stuff is not going to make any difference really. So anyway, but for what it's worth, sharing some of those horror stories, and I've had a lot of experience with this, and just being the engineer mind myself, it's a problem and something I just wanted to solve. And I think, some people watching this might be, well, you've watched tons of videos on YouTube, or maybe from all the other Insta famous or celebrity folks, and they're all talking about arrow noise, and they're dodging the arrow noise. It's not the sound of the bow, it's the arrow. And maybe I'm just speaking about this because it's kind of the popular thing. I do want to say that this has been something I've been thinking about for decades, to be quite honest. And as a little bit of proof, it's not quite a decade old, but back in 2016, I made a video where I was kind of comparing, I think it was 4-inch fletch vanes and I can't remember, on a blazer vane, trying to steer a fixed blade broadhead, a lot like my traditional arrow, a lot like this Magnus. I used to be a super die-hard fixed blade guy too, and we can get into that later. But anyway, in that video, I kind of started off the video with a clip of one of my friends bow hunting axis deer on Lanai, and I happened to catch a moment where he's a pretty good shot. He doesn't miss, and in the moment, he had a buck 40 yards, nice buck come up, and misses, doesn't hit it, buck runs away. And for the rest of the day, I really felt that he just flat out missed that deer. But in the back of our minds, I know he doesn't, my friend in particular, he doesn't really miss. He's a pretty good shot under pressure too. So when we got back to the house, I started reviewing the footage, and yeah, I definitely got to see that it indeed ducked the arrow. His shot was on the mark at 40 yards. The deer just hit the dirt, and arrow went right over him. And he was shooting pretty quick. We got short draws. We're all short, me and my friends, but we're shooting about 280 feet per second. His arrow back then was a blazer vane tipped with I believe a Wacom broadhead, fixed blade broadhead. And it was a very still day. There was no wind. and I happened to capture one of those moments where he missed, and that's just one that I've captured. I have a video that depicts an axis deer in Lanai ducking one of my friend's arrows, and it's something that I've known and hunted for a little while when I was a little kid, and I've had a lot of deer duck my arrows. I hit them in the back strap, so you just straight plain miss them. But what I've been trying to figure out is, has it been the sound of the bow, or is it the sound of the arrow that they hear? And from my experience, because I also hunt with the recurve really close, I've never had deer actually duck my arrow with the recurve, strangely enough, although I'm in close proximity and the arrow is a lot slower. So I begun to think that it's the sound of the arrow. In my own experience, probably the majority of deer I shot at has either moved, maybe I've missed, and decade plus more of that of hunting has just made me incredibly frustrated. So you guys can look up that video. In fact, I'll probably play it here so you guys can see it. And yeah, that was back in 2016, and since that time of kind of suspecting and thinking about it already till today, I think nothing's perfect, by the way, but I think I've kind of cracked the code a little bit, and I want to explain some of that here in as best as I can to hopefully make your experience in the field a little better. If you're an experienced bow hunter and kind of leveling up into that kind of thing, then this could just add that little bit of extra odd in your favor that can make the difference between success on that big old buck or maybe not, you know. So for what it's worth, you guys don't have to do anything I say, as always on my videos. You do whatever you want, but if you believe my success or my proficiency to be something worth of value and worth looking at, then maybe the information I'm about to provide here is as well. So to start out, I mentioned it at the beginning of the video. Doesn't matter what gear we talk about in any videos or any future videos I do, the gear doesn't matter unless you don't have the proficiency to shoot straight first. And shoot straight under pressure when you're hunting, maybe on the competition line, whatever it is. I can share that in another video, how things you can do to maybe get better at that. But the truth is, priority number one is you better be able to shoot straight first. And if you're not shooting straight and you're just making poor shots on game and stuff like that, definitely work on that. Don't even worry about this arrows. You know, pick an arrow that you can shoot accurate and just go hunting with that and go get the experience. What I'm talking about here is that little added edge for something very special like bow hunting axis deer, just because they're fast. A lot of other animals that we hunt in Hawaii, sheep, pigs are sometimes quick, but not that quick. Sheep and goats and pigs, you don't have to concern yourself with the arrow noise or what I'm about to talk about here too much. But axis deer, I think it is something that can change, at least put a little bit of odds in your favor. It's never going to be perfect. They're still going to duck and move sometimes, but this can help. So anyway, my own experience on some of the deer, a lot of people I think have the notion that unaware deer are probably better to shoot at, or maybe feeding deer are better to shoot at. And it's been my experience over 26 years probably of bow hunting axis deer that I've had more axis deer duck or dodge my arrows from a feeding position with their head in the grass than from any other position ever. I mean, it's at a point where even with my experience now, when I draw on it and I'm going to shoot at a feeding axis deer at some distance, you know, say 30 yards plus or something like that, it does run in my mind, is this thing going to duck me? Is it going to dodge me or spin out of the way? And yeah, I've had more feeding deer duck or spin out of the way of my arrow than any other deer, than deer standing there, than even deer that know my presence are there. To be quite honest, I've actually connected on more axis deer that knew I was there, kind of standing there and shooting at them at reasonable distances, 50 yards or less or something, and then feeding deer. So I wouldn't say that totally unaware deer is best. It would be good, but strangely I kind of happen to believe that some of them ducking when they're feeding or when they have their head in the grass, especially when there's no wind, a lot of wind in the environment will cover the sound. So if you've got a lot of wind, Lanai is often very windy. If you get a lot of wind, you'll probably be okay. Of course, you have to teach yourself how to shoot in that kind of crazy wind too. You got to get some accuracy there and some experience shooting in the wind. But yeah, the wind can help. But when there's no wind or low wind, they hear everything. And I just, I don't know. I got a feeling that when they're feeding or when their head is in the grass, and they hear a sudden sound coming at them, like the sound of your arrow flying at them, that hissing sound of the arrow coming, that really freaks them out, and they're more inclined to duck or lunge or something like that. So again, leading into the next thing, usually ducking, lunging, or spinning out of the way are the ways that they dodge your arrow, and I've had all three in numerous accounts. But I do notice some consistency with how they happen. Generally, I get more deer ducking the arrow, the arrow going over it when it's, say, 40 yards and under, 35 yards and under, those distances. And some people, some of the ethics police listening or whatever might be like, well, why don't you just go get closer, right? Like, if you're not shooting 40, 50 plus yards, having them duck is not an issue. I'm gonna call bullshit on that. It's my friend, one of my friends, he has video of me missing one at like 21 yards. I don't miss them at 21 yards. Like, that's not happening. Okay, so yeah, it ducked out of the way, gone. I actually had 2 does that day. It was a doe hunt. I actually had 2 does duck me within 23 yards. One of them I hit through the back. Both of them I hit through the back straps, a little bit of hair. And then later in the week I had others, and strangely enough, those were shot at with kind of this AAE Max Stealth. It's a Eastern Axis 5mm arrow. One of my favorite, still today my favorite arrow shafts for hunting, and a Rage hypodermic broadhead back then. That's what I was using back then. I can get into the details of why I think those things happened, and maybe today why I have less of that. But anyway, yeah, those are close shots and they duck. Something to think about there. When I shoot at them far, sometimes, say 50 yards and further, I have seen them lunge more. They'll lunge forward, and I usually hit them last rib and back. And I think you can look at the last 2 Axis deer videos I did on Lanai, this past season's one. And in 2022, I hit those deer back. They kind of knew I was there. It was about 55 yards and 51 yards, I believe, or 52 or something. And they lunged, and I hit them around the last rib area. So could you account for that? Maybe you could aim more forward, but I was kind of aiming right on the 12 ring area, and usually it's about 6 to 8 inches of lunge before I get the hit. And I don't advocate this shooting really far, but I have shot a few, much further than that, and I've had those lunge too and be a body length away before the arrow gets there. And I have hit some too. Like, I've hit some way out there too, that 12 ring, and they don't move. And I have some theories on all of that too. And in that experience, I did get a pretty cool buck at a pretty far distance, and that experience that day I was always suspect of them hearing the arrow coming at them. So I'm kind of a heavy proponent of, I think the deer dodge more the arrow coming at them than the sound of the bow. A little bit disorganized here in my thoughts trying to explain this. There's so much information I'm trying to put out at one time. So if you bear with me, hopefully you're taking notes if you're super interested, and you'll find some gems inside of this. But anyway, back to the story. So I shot this deer pretty far, right? Not triple digits yet, but getting pretty close, okay? And I'm not advocating for that. I just, you practice enough, you compete enough, it's not a very difficult shot, to be quite honest. And so I took the shot. I wanted to get some meat, and when I took the shot, the arrow takes a whole bunch of time to get there. And the buck didn't move as the arrow maybe got halfway there. But about 3/4 way there, I was shooting from about level position and across the canyon. So the arrow was actually coming above and going in on him, right? Because it's kind of far. Maybe when the arrow got about 3/4 way there, the buck, from a feeding position, picked his head up and looked straight up in the air. And he didn't look at me. He looked straight up in the air, kind of like something's coming out of the air at him. And then it hit him quartering away, and he didn't even go 20 yards. But that was one instance that really solidified the idea that I think they hear the arrow coming at them. Other instances are, of course, this is dangerous and don't do this. Do it with some safety, but you can stand downrange behind a bale or behind a building or something like that and have arrows fly by, and you'll notice like the bow is really not that loud. After like 40, 50 yards, you can barely hear the bow. It's not really a loud crack or anything like that to startle animals. So I don't think it's the bow at that point. I do think it's the arrow flying in the air coming at them. What are other? There are so many instances where I've kind of solidified this, but another one is just experimenting. So there are some seasons where there's a lot of deer there. Maybe I already filled my doe tag and I'm not trying to shoot another doe or anything, and I just experiment around, what startles them. And I have sat there with, maybe does at 25, 30, 40, 50 yards, all kinds of scenarios. And when I know I'm not going to shoot them or take them with me, I'll basically just sit there and it's kind of dead quiet or whatever, and I'll just clap my hands super loud. And when I clap my hands super loud, right, like a startling sound, do they duck or do they lunge or do they spin? Many times they don't. They just pick their heads up and look. So what's the difference between that and the bow going off? Maybe they can get used to the sound of the bow and just know that those are hunters. Or maybe the only difference between the bow and clapping and them not really moving, only picking their heads up, is when you shoot a bow, there's actually the sound of something coming at them, that arrow coming in. And I think that is that threatening sound that they pick up on and move to most at. Of course, when you're super close, and back in the day when I was high school, bows were super loud. We're all trying to shoot super light ACC arrows with the rocket, like, I don't know if they were like 50 grain broadheads or something. I had like a 25-inch draw shooting like a 285 feet a second arrow. Yeah, the bow was super loud, like, and you had to redo your bolt, check all your screws every like 3 times you shoot or something. And yeah, of course those bows back then were loud, and probably deer were freaking out because of the sound of the bow, especially if you were close enough, But I think today, many of the new bows today, they're fairly quiet, and at distance 40 plus yards or 30 yards, they're really not that loud. So that's another instance where I feel like it's the sound of the arrow coming at them that they're dodging and ducking. And so what else do I have? Closer duck, heard a bunch. And then I think on the internet, I've listened to this, like a lot of people, right, are talking about this and stuff, and I heard about, I think it was one of Tim Gillingham's podcasts or something, where they explained like some guys in Africa where they wanted to test it. Is it really the bow or the sound of the arrow coming at them? And they had these super skittish animals that are blind or something, and they set up a target behind the blind, not where the animals are. So they're going to shoot at the target behind the blind with the animals in front of them. And when they shoot at the target behind the blind, same bow noise and everything, animals maybe jack their head up with it. They don't really duck or freak out. But suddenly when you're shooting at them, they turn inside out and stuff. So maybe another instance where you need that noise of that sound of the arrow coming at them that is threatening, that makes them move. So if you believe in that idea, that's kind of cool, because with the arrows, well, we can quiet the bow all we can, right? Shoot a heavier arrow, get some string silencers, make sure your bolts aren't loose, check your quiver. You don't want some loose, hollow plastic quiver. You might want to fill that up with some kind of material to take up the vibration or that bell sound of it vibrating. Those are all things you can do to the bow. We can talk about that in another way, but with the sound of the arrow, there are lots of things we can do. And unfortunately, I think in the industry and stuff, there's no like real data or way to measure this. It's kind of just experiential. You just got to go out there and try. So before you have to go buy hundreds of dollars of vanes and fletch till you smell so much acetone you go high, I figured I could share that experience with all the different types of arrows I shot over the years, and some of the characteristics that make some more quiet than others and some more loud than others. So, starting with what I think is the most popular reason, right, is a lot of people think it's the vanes on the back of the arrow that make the noise, and it is very true. But there are some some rules of thumb that you can use to decide what will make more noise or less noise. And of course, like I said at the beginning of the video, definitely consider, shoot the arrow that's most accurate for you, what you can hit the target with. If you're not hitting the target, then it don't matter how quiet you make the arrow. If you can't hit it, you're not going to be too successful, and it's not going to be too fun. So make sure you shoot the most accurate arrow you can. But after you figured it out and you want to tinker and you want to get specialized, into not having axis deer duck you or dodge you all the time, if that's what you're experiencing, then, look into this. Anyway, one rule of thumb is the height of the vane. So what I mean by the height is, let me try to pick a tall one here. So like this, this is the AAE Max Stealth vane. The height is, how tall does it come off of the shaft? So, this dimension here. And in this case, I think these Max Stealths are about a 1/2 inch tall vane, which is, in my opinion, a little bit on the taller side. Now we're splitting hairs here, but I'll get to it soon enough. But anyway, how tall it is. So the taller the vane, generally the more noise it makes. And in engineering speak, basically, the vane is getting into more outside, undisturbed air, hitting more air, so to speak. So it's going to make more noise. And of course, there's probably some boundary layer effect against the arrow shaft, and air not moving maybe at the base of the arrow and moving faster the further you get away from the shaft. Little bit of engineering there. Maybe you guys don't care about that, but whatever it is, just know that the taller the arrow, the vane comes off the shaft, generally the more louder or the more noise it'll create in flight. So, one dimension. Second dimension is what's super popular today are 4-fletch. So people want to, maybe go with a shorter vane, but then 4-fletch them, like these. These are both arrows that I've hunted with and shot things with. Generally, 4-fletch makes more noise than 3-fletch, especially when they're the equal, right? All things considered equal, 4-fletch of the same versus 3-fletch of the same. The 3-fletch is going to make less noise in flying through the air. So something to consider there. While it's so popular to shoot a 4-fletch, you will probably never find me shooting a 4-fletch at an axis deer in Lanai or hunting locally here. So something to consider, and it's just my opinion there. It's too noisy for me, and I'm not gonna take that risk. What else? So the other one is the flexibility of the vane. So what should I use? So what I currently shoot right now is this is a tack vane. It's very stiff kind of vane. It's a lot like the boning heat vanes, which are these. Another 4-fletch heat vane, very stiff like the tack vane. Versus something a little softer. Here's a Flex Fletch 360, one of my favorite all-around hunting vanes. If you need a hunting vane to just do it all, fixed blades, mechanicals, quiet enough, steers everything, and all, Flex Fletch 360s, I don't think you can go wrong. I mean, this is a super vane. I've shot my share of deer with it, and even over the years, hunting back when Flex Fletch was kind of the thing in high school and whatever. Super cool vane. But anyway, it's a little more flexible. This Max Stealths, they're a little more flexible. So the more flexible, it could have a tendency to want to flutter in flight at speed. And that fluttering can make a little more noise than a stiff vane. A stiff vane would just kind of cut through the air without too much deformation or noise making there. And then, I didn't talk about it, but number one, right, most popular vane, blazer vane. It's about, over a 1/2 inch tall over the arrow, quite tall. It's gonna make more noise. It's not super stiff. It's a little flexible. It could flutter on the ends, making a little bit more noise. And maybe this steep leading edge, while it's probably pretty cool for getting good drag and steering, it does create noise. And these are some of the loudest arrows I've ever heard flying down range. A blazer or not this Pro Max, but the Max Hunters, the AE Max Hunters people use. They're about the same height as the blazers. They're pretty loud, and I'll be just honest with you guys. You'll never see me hunting axis deer with a blazer or a Max Hunter. It's just, unless I don't care, I'm just shooting does and I don't really care whether they duck or whatever. Maybe I would use it, but yeah, if hunting like opportunities and I don't get too many of them, and pretty cagey older bucks or stuff like that, yeah, you're not gonna find me using those. They're just too noisy in my opinion for that. But anything else, don't worry about it. You know, you use whatever. So that's the back of the arrow. Some things to consider there. And then now we'll talk about my stick bow hunting arrow. So feathers. Feathers are pretty noisy in flight. However, another thing to consider is the speed of the arrow. The faster the arrow flies through the air, the more disturbance it creates, and perhaps the more noise it makes. So while the stick bow arrow, this is kind of noisy with the feathers being rough and all, it doesn't fly nearly as fast. You know, maybe 160, 170 feet per second versus 280 out of most people's compound bows. It makes noise, but I haven't actually had that many deer duck my traditional arrow or when I go traditional stick bow hunting. The only reason I usually don't get them is because I flat out miss or I suck and I wound them. So gotta work on the shooting part there. But anyway, getting to the front of the arrow, on my stick bow arrow is a Magnus 150 grain stinger. So some things to think about are fixed blades with the exposed blade surface. You know, it's like fletching on the front of the arrow. Logically, fixed blades are probably going to make more noise flying through the air, cutting the air than a sleek mechanical that has, you know, the blade surface kind of tucked into the ferrule of the body of that. So fixed blades probably more noisy than mechanicals. The other thing about fixed blades are, I don't have one here, but venting. So there's the holes inside of the blades. Venting as it flies through the air is going to make more noise than a broadhead that doesn't have any venting. I don't have any one of those, but like a common fixed blade that doesn't have venting might be like a QAD Exodus. Those are pretty quiet because they don't have venting, but you know, my old standby Slick Trick 100, it's got a lot of venting. It hisses pretty good as you fly downrange. But say Slick Trick were to make one with a solid blade with no venting holes here, it'll probably be significantly quieter flying through the air. So those are things to think about. And then, so I said, you know, fixed blade, noisier than mechanical. Venting can make more noise than non-venting. Along the lines of venting, all mechanicals, they're not created equal either. So here's a Rage hypodermic that I used to use a lot of these before I kind of changed to the Sever broadhead. And mind you, I'm not sponsored or anything like that by any of these things. I just use what I really want to use. But if they see this and they're inclined to, hey, I really like your product, hey, I'm not opposed to anything here. But so if you take a look at the hypodermic and talking about like venting or exposed blades making more noise, in this case, you know, you can see that the Rage has a little more blade sticking up, a little more front leading edge of this tab for the blade flying through the air than versus the Sever is a little more sleek. And I can tell you, like the Rage flying through the air versus my Sever on the same arrow, the Rage makes more noise. So getting back to that story where there was one axis hunt for does that I think I fired 7 arrows to fill one doe tag that season. It was just atrocious. And what was going on that season, there was a lot of no wind days and stuff like that. You know, there's just no wind, nothing to cover the sound. So it's expected that I'll get some deer ducking and dodging. But I was pretty much shooting this arrow. It's a AE Max Stealth, which the Max Stealth's a pretty quiet vein in my opinion. Not the quietest, but it'll, you know, it's acceptable. But this the Rage on the front with a little bit of venting and this exposed blade surface was actually kind of noisy going down range. And this was the very build of the arrow that I was using on that hunt. And like I said, I don't miss too many nowadays. And on that trip, I missed 7 before I filled my one tag. Not good. And even the one that I did hit and fill the tag with, you know, the guys that go spearfishing for Mimpachis and stuff, it's so fast. She was actually broadside, and when I recovered her, the arrow was kind of out her rear end. So she had spun around and lunged in some way, and I hit her up the tailpipe pretty much, and that's how I recovered her. So, and I didn't even see it happen. It was so fast. Pretty funny joke there, but it was a reality. Like, I don't shoot at them like that. I only shoot at them pretty much broadside, and I recovered her, you know, rear end facing me and the arrow sticking out that way. Not not good, but it is what it is. So anyway, all of that information, I hope maybe you took some notes and maybe some rules of thumb or things that might help you out. And that leads me to the final conclusion of what is the axis deer arrow that I'm currently using and that I've had a lot of success with. So for the last season, not last season, but the 2022 season, you can look it up on YouTube. I shot this arrow. It was a 5mm axis 340 Easton axis with the 360 flex fletch vanes and a Sever broadhead on the front. This current broadhead on the front. Love the Sever mechanical broadhead. I used to be a die-hard fixed blade guy, but these Severs, and I shot Rages for a little while. They're cool, a little cumbersome, but these Severs, I really love them, and they're quiet and they do everything. So yeah, I used to shoot these flex fletches. My buddy Keaton still uses them. They have a lot of success with them, and I could recommend the Flex Fletch 360, especially if you're still shooting a fixed blade. If you can't get a fixed blade to tune with this vane, you probably have a bad fixed blade. You should probably shoot a different broadhead. So I recommend this one. It's quiet enough. I hadn't had any deer duck the Flex Fletch too much. It's been pretty good. But how I ended up going to the tack vane, this is a tack vane driver 275, was early in 2023. I drew an ibex tag for the second time in New Mexico in the Florida mountains, and there was no way I'm going to shoot a vane this big in the wind. This whole different conversation about what hits in the wind, what's great for accuracy, this and that, and that's a whole nother video. But anyway, I was going to shoot something a little more streamlined for the wind in those cliffs, longer distance shots. I'm planning for Sever mechanical broadhead. I wasn't very unlikely to use a fixed blade. I've shot fixed blades with this tack driver 275. It's marginal. I probably want a little bit bigger vane if I'm going to shoot a fixed blade. But for the Sever, works beautifully. I can shoot them as far as I want to, and it works out good, and it's super quiet. So the tack vane is not very tall. It's a 0.46, under a ½ inch tall. 2.75 long. It's a pretty stiff material, so all those factors combined make it to turn out to be a pretty quiet vane in flight, among the quietest, if not the most quiet one that I've shot. Least noise to the air, and then the Sever as well being one of the most quiet mechanical broadheads that I've shot through the air. And putting the phone down there, testing the noise, or having someone stand there and listen to them. That's kind of the experience I've had this season. Yeah, I mean, you guys can watch the last video. I only fired one arrow. It was about 51 or 52 yards. He knew I was there. He was already catching my wind, and yeah, he lunged on the shot, but the arrow made it, and rest is history. I feel like if I was shooting maybe a blazer, or if I was shooting another setup that's a little bit more noisy, maybe I would not have got that deer. I mean, maybe he would have ducked a little bit more sooner, whatever it was. Maybe I just flat out miss him. But a lot of success with this arrow, and might not be for you, might not be for everybody, but this is just my experience with it, and I can highly recommend it. So anyway, that's the video, guys. Hopefully I went through a lot of logic, a lot of information there. It's probably hard to digest, trying to compress 20-something years of bow hunting this deer into one video. That's hopefully useful to you guys. Hopefully you got value out of it, and hopefully it helps you guys bag the next KG big Axis Lanai buck out there, or Molokai, or Maui, whatever it is, and yeah, hopefully you have some good luck with it. So anyway, I'll make future videos into the future, talking about stuff like this, technical gear, maybe even shooting instruction, things like that, just to help make your experience out there a bit better. And yeah, I feel like if the whole community, if we all elevate our experience, and we all get better, then hopefully we can spend more time really enjoying the field, and perhaps as a community protecting what we have for the future generations, because our public hunting is, in my opinion, under attack and going away if we don't take care of it. So anyway, that's the video. Aloha, guys. Take care, and good hunting and quiet arrows. Aloha. Bye-bye.